at somewhere between 60 and 120 million years, the opalization actually happened.
Is this pug pedigreed or not? Can you tell?
So opal has a unique property. It actually glows if you expose it to black light. Really, really cool. So if you go out of a nighttime with just a black light, you'll probably find something. Now, that something may be opal, it may be potch, or it may be a scorpion. They also glow black light.
And welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects Podcast. The gang is all here today. Everyone's back. We're at episode 100. It's a pretty big milestone for us. And so we're pretty excited to be all recording together again today. We have a fantastic guest who's doing some fantastic things. But before we introduce him, let me say hello to Nicholas Blank.
Hello, mate. And it's a greeting from a much colder Cape Town. We've got two Aussies on the show and two South Africans. So I feel like we are the Antipodean counterparts of the show and balancing that out just by force of nature. And it's delightful to see Warren again. Hey, Warren.
You know, we're still on the same side of the hemispheres, right? So we're both freezing.
That's right.
I mean, like we're all cold.
One of the great benefits is that we get to do this at the end of our day. You guys get to do this at the beginning of your day, and no one's waking up at 1 a.m. because sometimes that happens to one of us.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that is true.
And so our guest today, and we're going to talk about all cool things, AI, Copilot, all of those cool things, is a Microsoft MVP. And Daniel, I'm going to let you just introduce yourself and tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what you do, where you live, all those kind of cool things.
Yep. So my name's Daniel Brown. I'm based here in Adelaide, South Australia. And as Chris mentioned, I'm a Microsoft MVP in M365. So that's my official designation as Microsoft MVP. I also run the Microsoft M365 user group and the Microsoft Copilot user group here in Adelaide. I speak, I present, I do all those good, lovely stuff around the country. And on the odd chance on the side, I also opal mine as well. So I think that's going to come up today. So yeah, that's a very interesting segue.
It's totally coming up today. I have so many questions.
It was fun. Don't get me wrong. It was fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to our next trip this October. So going to be very interesting times.
I watch it on TV, dude. I mean, there's some shows and that stuff is hardcore.
Yeah, it's pretty full on. Even the environment of which you have to do it is actually pretty hardcore as well. When it's the Australian outback, it's every aspect of it, everything that it means. Coober Pedy, what we were doing, there's every aspect of what that actually means.
Yeah, everything's trying to kill you. Pretty
much, including the flies. I've got a good video of this, and I'm sure it sort of surfaces up every now and then. But last time I was in Coober Pedy, which was last October, I was doing some exploring around where we were digging, and I wanted to sort of get a feel of the area. And you have to have the fly nets, you have to have those. But by the time I even noticed there was probably a good 300 flies on my arms. And I've got video footage of it because, sort of sneak into the pocket, get the phone. And by the time I recorded, half of them were gone, but it's still, a good 100, 200 flies on my arm, let alone my back. I mean, they're brutal, absolutely brutal. They get in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. Mid-sentence, they fly into your mouth. It's horrid.
Yeah, been there, done that. I was out in the town of Port Hedland, and I did a mail migration. So I migrated the town of Port Hedland, and I flew up there, and it was a little bit of a shock because as soon as I got off the plane, I was inundated with flies. And as you say, in your mouth, in your eyes, in your ears. And as soon as I stepped out of my camping bungalow, because I stayed over at the camping place where all of the miners stay over, and you get the single room to yourself. And as soon as I opened my door, I would have flies trying to get to the protein in my eyeball or crawling into my ear. And it was astounding. It was such a shock to deal with.
Yeah. And that's, it's interesting. I've been working with a mining customer, also a different type of mining, though up in WA, about 500 or so kilometers from Port Hedland, actually, Nick. And yeah, same deal, right? Like it's the Aussie outback can be pretty harsh, and for us it was obviously flies are a thing. We have flies here too, but I live in rural New South Wales, right? It's nothing like that. Like I have 10 flies around my head when I'm mowing the lawn. Like that's a lot, and I wear a net for that. So I can't even imagine going somewhere where A, you don't have a net, or B, if there's that many flies. But for us, dingoes and snakes were also quite a concern out in the Pilbara. But anyway, before we put everyone off too much, we've often said, I think, on the show that all this AI stuff is really cool. Like it's great to see all of these things, but like where are the real use cases, right? It's a technology that is really just waiting for a beautiful use case. And I think, Daniel, one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to you was you've found a fantastic use case for it. As you alluded to, the opal mining and the things that you kind of do in your spare time. I mean, tell us a little bit about how this sort of came together and sort of what you're doing with the technology, how you're making it kind of make your life easier, I guess.
Yep. So we got sucked into opal mining via the father-in-law, who's got a best mate up there in Coober Pedy, and he's like, you should come up, do some opal mining. And so we did. We went up there, checked it all out, and we were actually getting some holes drilled. So think of a big truck with a big drill on it going down 40 foot. There's two particular types of drill. One is a Caldwell drill, which has a big auger. It goes down, big bucket on there, collects the dirt in the bucket and brings it up. The other type is the spin-off drill, which is really just a big corkscrew drill. And that's the one we were using. It was cheaper to use. And I'm sitting there thinking jasper, gypsum, sandstone, mudstone as it's being flung off. And I'm like, well, if I can do that, so can an AI. So theoretically, my original train of thought was going to train the AI to detect sandstone, gypsum, mudstone, and other. The other is what I'm interested in, because if it's sandstone, don't care. If it's gypsum, don't care. But let's identify it and not actually tell the human. It was going to tell the human on the unknowns. So I don't know what this rock was. Highlight it, look at the screen, get an outline. There it is. And I actually got developing the technology, and I found I had better success when I was just looking for pure opal, or what's known as potch. So potch is clear, grey, single colour, useless, non-valuable opal. It is really, really common. It is everywhere. The actual colour stuff is the rare one. And I mean, colour's worth colour. And what I was looking for is, can I detect potch or colour, or potch and colour? And the way that I did that was using the customvision.ai, which is actually the Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services feature there. And we've got originally it was 3,000. Now we've got 5,000 images, all manually tagged with different aspects. So one of them is, yes, precious opal. One is potch. One is holes. And I know this sounds really basic, but keep in mind everything is through the lenses of an AI, or the lenses of the custom vision, because I want to be able to detect the hole. Think of the safety aspect. It can detect humans and it can detect machinery. So very, very rudimentary at this stage. And so we knocked it up, and essentially we were using it very rudimentary to get the foundations done. So try and get the amount of images that are wanted to be balanced, all the best practices with the custom vision AI. Like, for example, if you have 5,000 opal images, it roughly wants about 4,500 to 5,000 pictures of humans. I ain't doing that. Yeah, no, that's not. I'm not spending my time tagging humans. So it's got about 100. If I need to increase the accuracy of humans because it's being depicted up as something else like machinery, I'm not really concerned about that at the moment. The main goal is the opal and potch. Because if we can find that, that's the money. But we want to keep everybody safe as well. That's why we've got the humans, machinery, and holes. And from there, it was really just about refining the AI, putting in specific images. And it's really, opal miners are a bit secretive because they don't want to go around advertising that they've got a lot of opal, because then that means you had a find. Where are you mining? Word gets out, and all of a sudden you've got 5,000 people around you mining opal. So I do have a great mate of mine, Dan from Unearthed Australian Opal, to give him a plug. and he was my customer zero. He let me come on the mine, get all the photos, get all the imagery. He's the actual gentleman I did Opal Hunters with. So it's actually his claim, his excavator. And he allowed me pretty much unfettered access to all the goodies that I needed to get the actual sort of money shots for the AI, to be able to then get that eye in, or the AI as an eye, in for detecting those precious opal seams, veins, in both black and white light conditions. So opal has a unique property. It actually glows if you expose it to black light. Really, really cool. So if you go out of a night time with just a black light, you'll probably find something. Now, that something may be opal, it may be potch, or it may be a scorpion. They also glow in black light. So you've got to be careful with those. But that is one of the enhancements I am doing for this year in Opal AI, is to be able to also detect scorpions and centipedes. And where that comes from, just as a real quick sort of side note, what they have in Coober Pedy is black rooms, or black light rooms. And it's basically where they've got a conveyor belt covered by black lights. They tip the rock in one end, a couple humans in there picking through anything that glows. Spit all everything else out the back. It's a good way. I mean, that sort of way, you do have to be careful with the scorpions, because it's actually moving at speed. You know, you've got to really be picking quick. But it's a proven way of sort of getting opal and potch. So you just pick everything and we'll sort it out in the white light. And where I'm actually going with this is Opal AI, because I can detect that black light and white light. We're looking at automating the conveyor belt. So when it's detected under black light, the AI detects the opal or potch under black light. It will actually shift the direction of the feed of rock to a separate conveyor belt automatically through using edge devices and edge AI. So that way I can separate rock and opal/potch. And then, because I'm poor and it's just easier, we'll use a second black light room, but we won't use black lights. We'll use white lights and do exactly the same thing with potch and color, because I can also detect that. So we're looking at automating the entire process of that black light to, $1 million opal process. Very cool stuff. So this is actually giving us more than just this large language model use cases. Draft this email, draft this document, review this team's conversation, which is all helpful in productivity boosting. And don't get me wrong, I love that aspect of Copilot, of AI. But as you said, this is a very next step use case. It's something that's actually real world, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about opal. I've also got copper AI as well, which can do it with copper ore. So think of that. I mean, in any situation, you could be looking for different grades. And where I do want to take it, but this is very next level, is computer vision just doesn't have to be optical vision that humans see. It can be X-ray, it can be infrared, it can be all those type of sensors. So all of a sudden, we can now start feeding in a lot more sensor data in, like an infrared image, to an AI directly, without having to translate it from infrared into human visible spectrum into the AI. Now, yes, that is next level stuff, but with these sort of IoT, iOS for the sensors, the Internet of Sensors, it becomes more practical to sort of bypass that human component almost and feed those sensors directly into the AI. But that's sort of the down low of Opal AI and sort of how it come to be. I dobbed my friend Dan into Opal Hunters. They put out a shout out on Facebook looking for more miners, and I dobbed him in, and he dobbed me in sort of accidentally on purpose that I had the AI. And then they approached me to go, hey, we want to see it. Like, all right, well, no problem. Here it is. And we spent 2 days filming. We did have a find of opal down the hole, which was fantastic, which I've got right here. This is the actual bit we pulled out of the wall. To give you some context of, say, the past of Coober Pedy, Australia has been an inland sea, let's say a dozen times over the last 500 million years. 5 of those times there was a sea called the Eromanga Sea, and that did come down to Coober Pedy in a shallow area, somewhere between 10 metres to probably 50, 60 metres, because they have to have a little bit of depth. And we've got a lot of mussel shells, cockle shells, pippy shells. There are squid pipes, so the tops of squids, they generally fossilise, and that's what the Virgin Rainbow is. So if you look up the Virgin Rainbow, it is a spectacular, it's Australia's best piece of opal, worth roughly $1 million. It is absolutely fantastic, but it's as big as your finger. Like, it's that big. And as such, we find all these, sort of marine life fossils, and not always opal and not always colored opal, precious opal. But the one that we found is probably, I'd say, dare say, a mussel shell that we found. And if I put that up there, that's the mud side. But you can start to see some of the color up there. It's just,
Wow.
opal's hard to get on camera.
That would still be rough, though, right? That hasn't been kind of cleaned up and
that's
polished
rough.
off. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So this particular piece, it's been tumbled. We did actually tumble it in a tumbler, which was basically just spin it around in water for a couple of hours just to get everything off it in terms of sandstone and mud. But it does still need quite a bit of cleanup, as you can see. There's quite a bit of mud in the back there, or sandstone nowadays. But it's definitely what we would probably say is an opalized shell skin. So the actual inside cavity of the muscle's been filled with mud, but the shell's been replaced. Now, at somewhere between 60 and 120 million years, the opalization actually happened. So, very cool.
It is cool to think,
ask
though, that sorry, Nick, it's really cool to think that you're using 2025 technology to find stuff that is that old, right?
Yep.
That's crazy. Like, it's fascinating.
I'm interested about what
really
you're
is.
running on-prem though. Like, and I'm saying on-prem, but so like you've got a bunch of cameras. I'm assuming
Yep.
high
Yep.
definition cameras
Yep.
or like run-of-the-mill
Well,
cameras,
the
SLR
initial
cameras.
test was the Surface laptop. So I actually went down the hole with the Surface. But yes, you're right. This year I'm taking more high definition cameras because it can only process what it can see.
Yeah. And so then so you're literally running this on a laptop, and you're like, okay, plug, go, send, and that's that.
Yep.
That's insane.
I
We need
mean,
to get this like ruggedized Kubernetes cluster down there, dude.
almost. I mean, we could let's put an Azure data center in Coober Pedy, Opal Palace. There we go.
There we
The
go.
Opal region.
Not a bad idea.
If there's a knock,
it's geologically stable.
You
It's
pay
just
for the
really, really
data
hot.
center with one find, yeah.
Yeah.
If there's a knock on your door, tomorrow morning really early, and Warren's there with a suitcase and 5,000 Raspberry Pis, don't be surprised.
Build like a little mini rack, cluster the stuff, plug everything all in there, put a
Well, we
like
were
a
thinking
5G
something like a
modem,
Windows
Starlink,
Link
whatever.
or something.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there, Warren, but the new Windows Link that was announced at Build, I think it was. I want to get my hands on one of them and give that a crack because it's meant to be just really a GPU on wheels. So something like that. I mean, obviously, the bigger the model, the more process power, the more GPU power, the more RAM, all this sort of stuff kicks in. But for really what we're doing, like down in the trench,
you're using it for one specific thing.
Correct.
You're not.
You're
looking at stuff. You're not going to be co-piloting. It doesn't need to be generalized. You don't need like a 70B or whatever the case be. You're looking for something specific.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it works well. It's really good. I mean, it's the main problem, and you see this on Opal Hunters, is the actual sapphire screens. In the sunlight, they just turn black. So I've got myself under a sheet in the sun in Coober Pedy, cooking under there, just because the screens just turn black in the sunlight. But in terms of processing power, the laptop held up, didn't overheat, didn't do anything. No, it was all fine. The real test, and I suppose it does help because you can walk around and you look on the ground, but a lot of the time you're actually going to be underground. And this is where you need that offline capacity or a really, really, really long cable to be able to take it underground. And I mean, underground, it can be 45, 50 degrees up in Coober Pedy on the surface, but it's a pretty good 21 to 23 underground. Like it's really stable underground. Yeah, Coober Pedy. And that I should probably say another thing on just a little bit of info on Coober Pedy. About 90% of the town does live underground in what's called dugouts because, the sheer heat.
That actually makes sense. I was speaking to a dude who lived up in Phoenix in Arizona, and they do similar stuff out there. Hey, Chris, like those dudes, they
It's hot,
water
man.
their plants underground. Like they've got the pipes run underground, and then they spray the plants from underneath. They don't spray from the top because it just
You
evaporates.
cook the plant.
Yeah, it's just like.
And if you've ever tried drinking out of a fire hose, or not sorry, when you ever tried to drink out of a garden hose when the water's at 50 degrees, you know what it does for your tongue, it also does for the plants. Dan, I wanted to ask a question, and Warren really nicely led into the generalist AI use case, or hinted at it. So you've got a specifically trained model, and what we've all enjoyed, and particularly with the news that we've had over the last bit, is that a model can infer context from very little, right? Or expand on context. But what you've got here is a very, very specific context in a trained model. So this is not the kind of thing that you're going to take a quote unquote general model underground and hope that it's going to find something based on a prompt. You don't see this happening or being replaced in terms of what you've trained on specifically with a general AI model in any time in the future, do you?
Probably not. In essence, yes, but no. And I'll flush that out a little bit. So we've got a very custom model that's highly trained on highly targeted material. Now that does obviously return a very highly targeted result. But the major problem with that, I would say, is it looks through the world as if everything is opal. So if I pointed at my pug, it sees opal because there's a bright spot on his tail. It has different colors from the surrounding. Unless I train it what is a dog, it doesn't know what a dog is. So it's got to either be opal, potch, human. Yeah. So that's a big limitation. And obviously I've overcome that with opal because I'm looking for one specific thing. Here's opal, here's potch. I'm not looking at the general world. And that's probably going to be the harder one. So, like, think of the general image recognition model as the big general LLM. You know, it's got to be generally trained across everything, across every object that it wants to detect. And where I've overcome that is just literally going for almost that quantized unit of as small as I can get of what I'm looking for. Here's opal, here's potch, here's a human, here's a machine. If I start breaking it down, obviously, then I have to have very specific more information and give it that context over and over and again. And I think that's where a lot of this starts to unravel because now if I need a general model, well, now I have to train it in general things. And that just time, effort, I think as a minimum, the model wants a minimum 300 or 500 images of what it wants. So you're going to have to do 500 dogs, 500 cats, 500 birds. Now, eventually, you'll get to a point where you've got pretty good recognition. As soon as you pump in an image, you could almost write it off, just accept that as what it says, automate that process, because once you scan an image, it can then take that context, build it in the model, retrain, republish the model, and now you've got that training image loaded in the model. But where I think a next sort of phase and a next level comes in is taking it a little bit more to the agent conversation is we treat Opal AI as one of those agents. I can then have Opal GPT. So, and this is a new version of Opal AI I've got out. I've now tied it into Azure AI and I've got GPT-4o and all this sort of stuff. But what it can do is if I do point it at my pug and it does see Opal, I can then have the GPT go over that image and say, no, that's a dog. And then we go, okay, how should we then handle it? Do we actually go off to another GPT or another agent that I've got, which actually has all the mining data, geological data, spatial data to compare what I'm seeing with known records, if there's any opal in this particular area using GPS coordinates. So you can start to build up these different checkers and validators to say, okay, well, if it is opal, does it fit this particular pattern or this particular pattern or this particular pattern? And that can tell me which best ways to mine that as well, because I can get advice from it. So it's much more than just one AI at the moment. I mean, it is one AI in terms of the actual imagery, but there's no reason, and I've built this in, is why a GPT can't have final say. or additional context to the conversation. So you can say, hey, this looks like it's opal, it looks like it's a shell pocket. You might want to mine under it first using this technique. So once you've got a big enough area, because generally what you do is once you find opal in the wall, you want to mine under it and then drop that into that cavity so you don't break the opal, essentially. So you're not actually hitting it, because the bigger stones you get, the more money. But if we can have that training aspect, those identifying aspects, okay, well, this looks like it was a potentially some form of chromium nodule that potentially led to this opal, and chromium gives you those blues and greens in opal. The highest value opal being red, which is iron, surprisingly surprise. But you can have the AI itself, or the photo AI, and a GPT and a validator and to actually create this in this process. And when I say and, that's more and the different agent for this and the different agent for that. So you can actually have highly specialized agents forming this almost chain of custody on this information presented back to the user that gives what they need. And if you can tie that in with, say, your SharePoint or with training data or with mining data, you get that full context of what you want. Save a lot more time, mining, complexities.
What did you use to build so you're not an AI person by trade. I mean, your intro.
No, I am. Yeah.
I mean, but is that what do you generally do that? I mean, did you AI Foundry? Have you got
no, it's
some
customvision.ai.
extensions? Sorry, who?
Customvision.ai
Mm-hmm.
is the website, and that's run with the Custom Vision cognitive service in Azure.
Okay. But now if you had to use something like AI Foundry, with prompt flows and those sorts of things, I mean, would it achieve the same sort of result? And I'm asking, this is more just a generalized sort of
So you're saying if we use, say, an LLM rather than, say, 5Vision or something?
No. So what I'm saying is AI Foundry has all the models inside them.
Yep.
And then you've got this playground, and you can sit and you can fine tune, you can deploy Kubernetes clusters from within Azure and all that lovely stuff. And we do all that stuff all the time. I was just sort of, taking it from a perspective, I know nothing. Let's say I know nothing about fine tuning a model. Let's say I want to look for expensive pugs. Is this pug pedigreed or not? Can you tell me? And then I feed it 5,000 pictures of pugs. Where would I start? Which tool would I use? And I think what I'm trying to say is, how did you begin to build this thing? I mean, was it something is it hobbyized? I mean, I like to play around with my Flipper Zero and my Raspberry Pis and stuff, which is pretty fun. Have you ever cloned a hotel key card? It works.
No, I haven't done that.
But yes, I think my question is, where did you start? It was what was it? I mean, we now know what you do, how you do, where, but how did you find
the starter tool? The starter tool, or
the starter tool, and then you went in and you were like, "Oh, this is cool." And can you patent this? Can you patent this? I mean, I would put something in there so somebody doesn't steal it on Opal Hunters or something.
So the starter tool that I got, I had my toes in. Keep in mind, when I originally built Opal AI, Azure AI and Azure AI Foundry didn't exist.
No, it didn't. No.
Yeah, they were completely non-existent tools. So
I don't even think we had Studio then. Hey.
No, not even Studio when I first started it. I don't think. This was 2020. How long have I been doing it now? So filmed in 2023. So it was around 2022, 23. I was playing in that space. So it may have just landed. It was just AI Studio or around then, but even then it was still pretty light. So the actual starter tool is a website called customvision.ai, and that's run through Microsoft. I mean, that's Microsoft's. And it was essentially the website to show off Custom Vision, the Azure cognitive services that's built in. And through there, it's exposed now through the Azure cognitive services in Azure. So it's all through Azure, but it's just through that test website. And that's where I started playing, and we had early success. Like when I first built it, don't get me wrong, I was sitting on the couch, shorts, no shirt on, mucking around in the dugout at 10 o'clock, seeing which I could get working. And I found the customvision.ai website, and I looked at their code, and they had an example published as well. So what I did is I actually took that example, and Dan at the time, who's with Opal Hunters, I gave him a call and said, look, can I come out and have a look at what you're doing? Because he was actually out there with the excavator digging at night time, and he was only 2 minutes down the road. I mean, it's just jump in the car, cross the highway, and there's the Opal field. He goes, yeah, come out. I found some potch, and it was a vertical of potch. And now, long story short, with verticals, obviously it's vertical, but it was just potch. It was grey. It was nothing. So I jumped down the pit, jumped down the trench, because it was a trench and a pit, which was even great for this, unfit redhead. And the Custom Vision AI, the sample one, actually picked up the rock as a reef. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty good. Now, whether or not the specific rock that I was looking at was reefy or not, it's the right area for it to be a reef. We've got shells, we've got the lowland sea, you got the corals, you've got that. So it picked it up straight away. I'm like, all right, definitely picked that up. It didn't pick up the potch. So the potch was about that an inch thick and running, 6 foot up, but it's worth nothing. So he just buried it. But it didn't really have much ability to pick that up because it's just rock. I mean, it wasn't something that the general AI was trained on. And then that's where I took that general AI, put my images into it, rebuilt it as my own model as part of customvision.ai. It's all in customvision.ai. And
awesome.
Built the custom front end on it, which is WPF and C#. And now I've got that integration with Azure OpenAI, AI Foundry. I've now got the GPT models deployed through AI Foundry. But long story short, it is a custom front end in WPF and C#. But there's yet again another example with that. You can download code, find that, and just run it. But the main website is that customvision.ai.
Okay.
I was really impressed when it picked up that it was a reef. Like that was a good moment, because I mean, I can't prove that it was a reef where I'm standing, but given what we know about the area and the type of rocks we were pulling out, yeah, it was probably a reef.
That's awesome.
Very cool. It was very interesting.
Like literally just sitting in the outback with the flies swarming around your head.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, you're like on customvision.ai. What's the connectivity like there? That's
not bad.
Do you get Starlink?
Yes. So Starlink is probably the provider of choice in Coober Pedy. Now there is the other main service providers, Telstra, Optus, and Vodafone, are the big ones up there. Service within the town, perfect, no problem. Out in the Opal fields, that's a bit sketchy. If you're close to town, no problem. The further you are away from the single tower that you can see from miles, the worse it gets, obviously. And anything deeper than 4 foot, so if you go down a 20-foot trench, yeah, you've lost signal. So that is something that you do have to overcome. And this is where edge processing really sort of takes off, and let's run the model at the edge, offline, and pick it up from there. But yeah, generally speaking, internet connectivity is a bit sketchy in the Opal fields.
So what I'm hearing is you need a rig with a mobile Starlink on it and some really decent Wi-Fi hotspots that you can just deploy when you're in the open fields. Just drop one down the trench or down the hole. Right? I'm starting to just picture this little city that you're building here with all this stuff. That's why
it is almost
as well.
Underground. Yeah. Some of the places I've seen, like two semi-trailers sitting on top of each other, still wouldn't touch the roof. And you could drive them down this hallway. Like there is some big places underground in Coober Pedy, like big places, especially where they find big opal. That just becomes a really, really big area. It's crazy. But worth going if you've never been. Definitely worth going.
I have not. I think it'd be super interesting. I was going to ask you. So where do you go next from this? Right, you're evolving this. This is your IP though, right? This isn't something that you've released as a GitHub repo somewhere that someone else can mess with. This is yours, or am I wrong that this is a community project?
No, this is mine. So this is officially owned by my company, or my mining company, which is Archon Mining.
Okay, very cool. I yeah. So really, just how far can you go, right? Is probably what you're thinking now, because it sounds like there's so many. And the other thing about this sort of landscape is that things are just changing every day, right? There's just like enhancements and improvements and new models and new everything every day. So does that frustrate you? Does it mean that you feel like you invest time in building something and then within a month or two it's obsolete, or does that drive you because if you're stuck with a problem for a week or two, you find solutions quicker? If that makes sense.
Both.
Okay.
I mean, if I do want to change the model and do want to get it more into different, or now using, say, like a ChatGPT image model, I then have to reinvest that time with the tools to create that. That's been relatively harder in past lives, but recently Microsoft have made it easier. I can export everything out the project. So I can actually get all the images, all the image ranges, where we've actually tagged, what the tags are, and re-import that as a package. So that makes life a bit easier. And then I can then run that through a different model. But you're right. I mean, keeping up with everything so far to date, it's a huge amount of work. I mean, just advances in GPT, advances in Copilot, advances in every other platform, the foundation or the creation of AI Foundry or the AI Studio or the Open AI in Azure as well, or the Azure Open AI instances. It's a lot to take in, and also to see how not so much all the features and benefits and all that, but to see the actual work done. So if I have like 4.0 and 4.5, if I have the same system prompt, the same message, the same grounding, what am I actually getting? How is it improving? And that takes time. I like to think that we could potentially have an AI that checks all of our data. And I've often said to various people, like, you could have an AI that checks your tone, your terminology, your language for your organization through an AI, but we can't really have an AI that checks if one AI is better outputting than another AI at the moment. Because it's say yes or no, and what's it really going to be deciding? Is it better on this variable or better on that variable? The human still has to play that part, but even that, you could spend a week just doing that, comparing outputs from AIs at the moment. There's so many.
Yeah.
I mean, I lost count at, I think, 1,900 different models in AI Foundry. Like, I'm not going to go through that.
It does. I mean, and I think that kind of brings you to one of my last questions, I guess, is if I'm listening to this now and I'm going, wow, that's a cool use case, and you've been able to build this thing. Where do I start? Like, if I've got an idea for something, where would you recommend someone starts with this stuff? Like, if they want to dip their toe in the water and actually start messing.
Yeah, I mean, if you do want to say play the game that I've played, and that would be customvision.ai. Start there. It's a really simple website. It's really designed for end users. It's not a complicated thing. You basically go in there, give it a name, give it a picture, and start uploading and training, and you can see and tweak it. Relatively minor. It doesn't have all the features that you get exposed through Custom Vision in Azure AI, of course, but it's meant to be that starter, that draw card in. That's where I would recommend, because all you really need is images. 15 images of something. That's what the minimum requirement for Custom Vision AI is. So if you've got 15 images of your dog, 15 images of a car, of Opal, of whatever, you can start to build and tag those models. Now, will it be accurate? Yes, it can be really accurate if you've got just 15 images of one thing, is that's all it sees. But you have to do the training and getting in different scenarios, different angles, different lights, sunlight, darkness, all this sort of stuff. That becomes a complicated part. But for example, like to prove a concept, here's 15 images: dogs, cats, and birds. Done. It's enough. It might be low confidence, say 50 to 70%, but as a proof of concept, as a starter project, perfect. There you go. I mean, if it's something really unique, then it's a lot easier. You don't need as many images to get that confidence up. But yeah, customvision.ai and Azure AI would be the place where I definitely start send people.
Fantastic. I guess before we sort of finish off, how do you want to be found? Is there anything you want to plug? You mentioned some user groups at the top of the show. Can folks find those on the internet? What's LinkedIn? What's a good place for you? Are you on the socials?
Yep. LinkedIn is probably one of the best places. So just look up Daniel Brown. You'll see my mug there. And Meetup is the other ones. I've gone away. I mean, I've got my own personal website, which is www.danielbrown.id.au. But it's not really a blog these days. It is more of a bit of a marketing thing. But yeah, check out the user groups. We're online as well. So they're both hosted on Meetup. So that's the Adelaide Microsoft 365 user group and the Adelaide Copilot user group or Microsoft Copilot user group. But we've got, I mean, to give the other user groups a bit of a shout out, we've got 6 or 7 user groups here in Adelaide. We've got a pretty good community in terms of user groups. We've got the IT
Sounds
Pro.
like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. It's very, it's very unique. Our Microsoft guys here in Adelaide, they're the locals. They're just used to us taking over their office like 6 times a month, and it's just what happens. They come out the office out the back, and there's 30 people sort of standing in there, and well, who are you? It's like I work here, and it's kind of just weird for them to go over to Melbourne or Sydney or Perth and just go, well, when's the user groups happening? They're like, they don't happen in the office. So it's put our outputs are locals. They're like, well, it's just normal for us. And it's really good to have that community, and we do have that spread. Everyone from, hey, I've never touched Copilot or AI or 365 or SQL Server or Fabric or anything like that. The other user groups, and we cater for all. So it's not something that it's highly technical. Sure, we'll have highly technical sessions, but we'll pump those out early. So if you're not interested in those, you've got well and truly advanced time if you are to come in.
I love it. Adelaide is one of my favorite cities in Australia, honestly, and I think the Melbourne folks are gonna hate me for saying this, but I next to Sydney, I think Adelaide is one of the best places to visit. So next time I'm out there, I'll definitely make the effort. I wanted to actually, before we finish up the show, I mentioned at the top of the show that it's episode 100, right? And we don't normally call out episode numbers when we actually record these, because sometimes we shuffle things around and we publish things out of sequence or whatever. But this very much and very deliberately is, episode 100. And I wanted to call out that, so what does that mean, right? Like first episode of the Cloud Architects was late July of 2017. So, we're almost at that sort of 9-year mark at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. Almost 100 hours.
Ago.
Almost 100 hours of published podcasts at this point, which means Nick has listened to probably 200 hours worth of our recordings and yammering during the during the edit process. We've had 86 unique guests on the show, so we often have had returning guests and stuff like that. I think 137 total guests on the show. The person who's been on the show, the guest that's been on the most, is Stephen Rose, who's had 4 appearances on the show, and then Anna Chu has had 3, and there's a few other folks who've had 3. So it's been a really fun 9 years, right? And so I thought it made sense for us to just call a little bit of that out for some folks who are listening and who maybe new to the Cloud Architects or haven't quite only just found us or what have you. We've been around for a little while. We've been doing this for a little while. I think we've recorded in something like 13 different countries as well. Like there've been recordings from Hong Kong. There've been recordings from New Zealand, many places in the States. It has been a pretty awesome journey for the last 100 episodes. So, on to the next 100, I guess. Daniel, really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Happy birthday as well from us to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for making the time. I'm sure there'll be a cold beverage to follow this.
Very much so.
And as always, Nick, Warren, guys, thank you. Great to see you. Closing thoughts before we let Daniel go have his birthday party.
Enjoy your birthday, dude. Have a drink for me.
No problem. Thank you very much. Congratulations on the 100th episode.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been a good one.
And one of the things we have to mention, since it's 100 episodes, and a lot of our, I want to say, loyal listeners and the folks who followed us so loyally over the last 9 years, for those of us who haven't yet, consider subscribing to the media that you're watching this through or listening to this through, because it really does help us, and it helps get the show out there. And if you've appreciated the kind of goodness that we've created, consider helping a brother or a sister out and pointing them towards the show.
Well, folks, thank you very much.
Thanks,
we'll
guys.
see you again on the next episode. And Dan, have a good one. Take care.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Ciao.